What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Canton Bound, episode 19. I know I promised Adam was going to be back, but I got something better. Brandon Sanders joins us again. Again, he's joining the Canton Bound. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm good, man. I'm happy to be, I guess, subbing in. We're going. Shout out to ATM. Know what you're up to, buddy. You're busy, B, but hope you come back soon. But glad to be back on Canton Bound, man. Feel like this is going to be a regular kind of occurrence, man. I think I'm the first returning one since you guys have taken over the helm.
Hell yeah. Well, I think you might have been one of the only guests we've ever had on
We
other
got
than.
Felix and Matt, so
Yeah,
they got a
yeah,
few
that
other
doesn't
guys.
count, man. Those guys aren't real.
They're an anomaly.
No, they're just the spitting image of Adam and I, right? The way they argue and fight, bicker
It is
amongst
true
themselves.
love-hate there for sure.
That's why the four-way is the greatest thing ever when we all get together.
And it
I
was
don't even
almost
have to fight Adam. I just let.
yeah, you just sit there.
Speak of the devil, he just popped on. He'll be here in a second, but Brandon's joining us here, so he's going to talk about
Oh,
roster deconstruction.
ATM.
Yo,
And
yo,
what we're
what's up,
going to
fellas?
do, we're going to pop this up here on the screen. So we'll talk about it on the podcast form, so just like you get it. But if you do want to check out the visuals or look at the spreadsheets that Brandon has made, just come check out our YouTube channel, southharmonff.com. We'll put it up on Thursday as well, so you can actually see for yourself if that's how you choose to do it. But like I said, we will try to do our best to talk about it on a good enough level that you can understand it in
Articulated way.
podcast. And I think, Brandon, this is probably pretty interesting because I don't know. I don't think, Adam, you do this, and I know I sure as hell don't do it. But as you can see here, the spreadsheet listing out your entire dynasty team. Right?
One of many. Right. So this is what we call deconstruction. Deconstruction, you may have heard it sometimes in the dynasty circle. Sometimes it's just called reflection. But basically, it's looking at a roster, right? And you're like, okay, how did I finish? So it's like, okay, in this situation, fifth place, I was the guy that sent some picks, got some of the veterans, wanted to push hard, lots of injuries, and I didn't get in. Good thing is I was able to get the 101. Guess what? I already sold the 101, so someone else has now earned their 101. Congrats to my buddy Nick in the other league. Basically, you now have the 101, and I don't think I have enough to or want to push for the 101. So I'll have to get sneaky and get either another second or another first or anything like that. But going in is just reflecting, like, how did you do? What was your strategy when you lost those few games? Was it because this is different guys in best ball, and Adam and Mike, that's the best part about probably being in best ball is like you're not making that decision. However, you have to be strategic in other aspects as far as having depth, but having smart depth, if that makes sense when it comes to best ball, having guys that can produce. And we could talk about strategy there as we're talking about. This is another way of strategy, just literally just looking back, reflecting, and seeing what you have, what you're losing, and then what you can kind of attain by kind of breaking this down and stuff like that as well. So this is kind of the setup that I have that is working on. And of course, I'd look at it as like, what is a projected starting lineup possibly going into 2024? What's looking as far as like your overall bench? What does your IR look like? Who's on your taxi squad? And then pretty much what I do is I look at things like fantasy points. I also look at the average fantasy points because I think that's more telling overall of the 16 games that matter, or 17 if you're playing in the championship. Week 18 don't matter. I'm sorry for those that are still playing.
Yeah.
You're in the ice age. We can talk about it. There's a group therapy session, right? We can talk about it, but please don't play week 18 unless you plan on playing every backup, which might be a strategy within itself, right? But you're looking at that. But I think the most important thing that you need to look at is the age of a lot of these guys. So, for example, if you're watching on YouTube, Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old, right? He's got another thing you want to look at is contract. What does their contract look like, right? So if they are a UFA, which Barkley is one of my guys, Zeke, who's only spent 1 year in New England, who did okay because of Stevenson going down. He's a UFA. And then I got my guys like my buddy Joe Flacco, who turned up. Shout out to ATM over there in Cleveland. Got a good playoff rocking and rolling going on, but he's a UFA, and they'll figure out, do they want Flacco? Do they want Watson? What the heck is going on in Cleveland after this year? But they'll figure it out later, right? These are the things we have to look at as far as an overall sum of what we need to, taking the inventory, what we can do, and then this sets up our strategy. Okay, this is what I need to kind of do in the off season, especially if you have a a league that goes year round where you're able to trade no matter what. Unfortunately, in this league, this one shuts down after a while, so my other league mates disappear for a couple months until it's time for draft season. But for me, I'm already setting up how I want to approach them. Another thing we talked about in the past is knowing your league mates. Of course, these are the guys that I rocked with from the fantasy footballers from day one, as far as the writing team. And then now, we're still we did Dynasty together. We learned Dynasty together, basically. So these guys will probably never see this episode, and that's okay. It just makes it easier for me to approach them once those doors open when it comes time for drafting season. And here we are, and I already have kind of like 5 or 6 moves I'm looking kind of do. So I'm a little bit more ahead of the schedule, where everyone else is just kind of flinging draft picks or flinging players. You can be ahead of the game by knowing who you want to tier up or tier down for, and what if you're looking to get back in the draft, this could be a good strategy for you.
I really do like this too, how it's broken down, because one thing I never really take into a whole lot of consideration when looking at my teams, like I'm going to take into consideration points per game. For us, me and Adam, we're going to, like, if I were to make this spreadsheet, which would be almost impossible for me with 40 some leagues, but I do think I might use it for the ones I really care about, right? I got some bigger money ones. There's some ones that just mean more. Adam knows what I'm talking about, like some of the OG shit league.
Sure.
Winning that thing.
Yeah, man. He wants to come back for it,
Right. I gotta take Adam off the crowd, but I've never really considered contract when I'm looking at it, right? Like how often, you kind of got in the mind, what guys are free agents, but also knowing like how many years are left on these contracts, right? Just kind of setting you up where you have that visual where you go, yeah, Kyler's probably being in Arizona for a while, right?
Yeah, 5 years left, absolutely.
Well, I mean, even and if he's not, like, let's say the aberration was he's not, that 5 years left, he's going to be somewhere. Someone's going to have that contract. Like he's a starting quarterback for 5 years minimum, and he's probably going to be longer than that. If we're being honest.
Have you ever thought about putting like a potential out category in too, like with the contract? You know what I mean? So,
right, yeah.
Like for example, if we took Tyler Lockett, right? We know he's got a 2-year contract, but is there a potential out this offseason coming up where if they thought Tyler Lockett's production had dipped, which I think we can all agree it wasn't the greatest year for him, but right. If they wanted to get out, like would you put a column where it said potential out 2023, whatever, 2024?
Yeah, I thought about it, especially with the ones like Diggs. Like, what if they don't, go all the way? Diggs will start his. You know how Diggs is. It's just like, if he ain't the star of the show, if you ain't talking to him on the regular. So if you're Josh Allen, you gotta stay on Diggs, because if not, Diggs will either disappear or he's going to demand a trade, and then he's going to want to get out. He's, we're looking at Stephon Diggs at 30 years old. He's got like one more money bag grab, right? And then it's about out. But he's still playing at a higher performance. But the descent is coming, right? So it's like it's a matter of time. Father Time always wins, like we talked about, right? So it's like you got to monitor that. Cup is 30 years old as well. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not going to last forever. He's got 3 years left.
3 years, yeah.
But look at what Puka's doing already. Look at, we talked about that in the previous episode. McVay knows how to hit on people deeper in the draft and stuff like that. So who's to say they don't find another stud wide receiver? There's plenty of them that are coming up here in this draft. So it's like, Cup could be, not saying pushed out, but this could be like his last year of prominence. So now might be the time to get out of Cooper Kupp, right? Guys like Zeke and Saquon are getting older and older. You can look to like move them, but they're completely UFA. So seeing the contract, you already know what's to come, right? So it's like if Barkley or Zeke lands in a wrong spot where it's by committee, then that's not good. You know what I'm saying? There goes those fantasy points that you relied on, especially Saquon. But I did think about that, because there's the guys where they might not, move on. This might be out of the blue, like a Russell Wilson situation. It's just like, we don't want you here. We'll just take the cap hit type situation and then move on. So it's like, who's to say? So I have looked at that one in different scenarios and things like that, more than just like the 4 years, 2 years, 3 years. This was kind of just knowing what I need to look at, and then kind of just keeping your ear to the ground and hearing about those contracts, because you're right. Like Lockett might not be a lock. Cup might not be there much longer. Those type of guys you got to keep track of.
Well, let me ask you this: diving in and just looking across this, what is your initial thought of your team with with the information you have in front of you as you kind of deconstruct it? Like, yeah, so what is your initial thought to take or to do with this team? Like first steps, or just where you assess it and what your feeling is of what you should do?
In the before the season started, I was like, all right, definitely contender. Well, this is before the Achilles and Kyler coming back right. I didn't have Flacco on the team. Literally, I got lucky in Fab and pulling him and being able to kind of pull out some wins. So this became a pretender team. When I talked to Mike about, taking on a best ball team, I was like, is it a contender, a pretender, or is this a rebuilder type situation? Because I just need to know the mindset that I need to be in. So this is a pretender. This is one where, like, even what I got now, and it's an aging team, if that makes sense. So now it's time to keep the cornerstones, and we can talk about cornerstones and stuff like that as well. But guys like Gibbs, and then guys like, do I keep Njoku or do I sell him while he's hot type situation? So it's like you have that, I still have some. Let's be honest, like I'm with the strategy. You don't really. I'm gonna have a few tight ends, but honestly, I don't need this many tight ends. Honestly, like Conklin was all right. Fan did absolutely nothing. I don't know if I can even get anything for Fan. I would take a fourth or fifth right now for him, to be honest with you, if I could. If not, I'll maybe take like Fab money at this point, like whatever I got to do to get some money, right? Or get him off the team. But like Logan Thomas was just a grab because that was Sam Howell's boy. So that was just his, that was just the name thing. Conklin was the blanket to Zach Wilson. And we talked about Zach Wilson last episode as well. So it's like he had to survive for his life out there. But all I cared about was just throwing in Njoku, and I just needed one guy for, when he wasn't playing, because Njoku, the last part of this, the season we've all attested to, has became tight end one. So
Yeah.
I got lucky with the Flacco and Njoku stack. Still, I was out of contention. So it's just one of those things where, like, I'm looking to move pieces, especially if I can, like the guys like Deontay, Cooper. I still like the guys like Debo, Jameer. I kind of want to keep Kyler for a while. Barkley would be nice. It just depends on the where he lands, and that, of course, can ruin or can benefit your value there, depending on where he goes. So it's your guys' decision, and it's something I have to make up. Do I sell him before he has a landing spot, or do you get rid, or do you wait until he sees if he re-signs with the Giants, and if they keep him, and then kind of move on from DJ, basically. So
See, I like this. It's paying off already, right? You touched on Noah Fant. Like, should I move Noah Fant now? Could I even get a fourth? Could I get a fifth? One of the things, though, like, because I mentioned earlier, I don't ever really take into consideration right offhand, and I wouldn't know unless I actively looked. I didn't know Noah Fant's unrestricted free agent, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's one guy right now where you look at and you go, he didn't do anything. He really hasn't done anything since his rookie year, where we were like, oh, man, he might actually be something, right, with that athleticism. But
look at Njoku. I think just think about, remember when the Browns signed Austin Hooper, right? And Njoku was kind of in this like secondary role. Right. But you knew what you're seeing right now was, I guess that it feels like that was the high end upside you would maybe hope for, but it happened. And Noah Fant, I think, has that type of athleticism. So if he goes to a situation where he's not in this, three-way tight end committee, I'm not going to say he turns into Njoku, but why not? But at least he could be worth more than a fourth. So it might be worth just holding around and seeing where he ends up shaking out with. Right?
I think that's what you do when you look at something like this, like a spreadsheet for roster deconstruction, where you go, I could move him, right? And if somebody offered me a fourth, is he worth it? Yeah, like I'd probably rather just move off him. But the fact he's an unrestricted free agent, and we know how that situation was in Seattle, where it was just, like our guy Eric said, it's a three-way F-fest at tight end, right?
Yep.
Colby Parkinson's playing, Will Dissly's playing, Noah Fant's playing. They're all sharing snaps and equal snap shares and target shares. They're divided amongst them. What happened if Noah Fant signed where he was the number one in an offense that was pretty decent, right? If it went on somewhere. Could you get more than a fourth at that time? I would imagine. There'd be a little bit of hype, and maybe somebody will give you a third. So if I were to look at it or deconstruct this as if it was my own roster, that'd be a guy immediately where I'd look. I go, I could move him now and maybe get a fourth. Or I could just wait and see if he landed somewhere, and I could generate a little bit more buzz. Maybe I get a third. Maybe I want to keep him at that point. But worst case scenario, he comes back and he's in Seattle, and I'm still looking at maybe getting a fourth if I was lucky. Right? Maybe that's the situation. So I do like when you break this all down and you add all of this information to it, where you can just get a quick snapshot and go, should I move Noah Fant right now in this league? Maybe.
One thing I think too, because I think especially this time of year. So when I say this time of year, the season's finished, the NFL season. We're going to start transitioning to the 24 class and like dynasty leagues, right? That's whatever the focus is going to switch to. But at least as of right now, still, it's not the case. So I think the big reason I'm saying that is you right now, I think, still can get dollars closer to peak. Maybe not the full boat, but closer to peak for some names that have dynasty value. Whereas as the combine comes around, the Senior Bowl, you'll see a lot more of this age start to increasingly dip, and that's like a terrible time to sell now. Reason I bring it up is, so if you decide that you're in a situation you want to get out of the pretender role and just start re-rolling this thing and getting young, this is the time I'm looking at focusing on, is someone willing to pay for the name cachet of Diggs? Deebo Samuel, as much as I was not the biggest fan, like he is at a great probably sell price, right? Because of what he did at the end of the year. Some of these type of players, I'm looking at seeing what I can cash in on right now, because if you don't do it probably in the next month or two, that's obviously going to be dependent on what your league mates let you do. But if you don't, you're probably going to end up holding these guys all the way through the season, and then you got to do it in the start of the year or early, and you got to hope for no injuries and production's still going well, right? There's other things that could get in the way of selling.
Right. And I think it's also, like we talked about, knowing your league mates and stuff like that, knowing that, these guys they're technically on vacation until probably April, May, when it's time to draft, right? So for them, they're just going to come in, and the biggest time for us, like, is draft is where we have a lot of our trades take place, a lot of shifting and moving. We have like abundance of trades, right? So I know that's where I need to like make my moves and stuff like that. And I'm more sneaky about it. It's like, I'm not coming for your 101, right? I'm not going to come for the 102, 103, but I'm going to be like, guess what, boys and girls, the Debo's for sale. Or I'm going to be like, guess what, Diggs is up for grabs. And then if you just so happen to want to throw me a higher first round pick, I'm open to it. I'm open to tearing down. There's the strategy there. Maybe I want to tear up. Maybe I want to move up to CD Lamb. What's it going to cost me? Diggs and something else, right? Maybe I throw in my second round for next year or something like that. Because what we talked about in the last episode, right? We can find diamonds in the 4th and the 5th. We can find them in the 3rd rounds of, of those type of rookie drafts. So I'm not afraid to move a 2nd or a 1st in order to, get that advantage and things like that. Also, I kind of want to bring up, things like stashing away and things like that in particular. So every league is different, but I love the process of also having these guys, whether you have a league, if it's a best ball, it's a lot easier. So for ones like with Mike's leagues, he has an abundance of roster that you can kind of throw on there. So I say take your 2nd string quarterbacks because of the injuries we saw. That's a big deal. Also, I'm of the process, or I'm of that club of any running back on a 53-man roster. I know Mr. Scott Connor, who I heard was sick. I hope he's getting better. If he sees this or hears it, get better, Scott. But me and him would probably be really close friends, because that man has a lot of the same strategy that I think about. So, like, I just threw Eric Gray on there just to see what would happen with Saquon, right? So whatever happens to Saquon, if Saquon comes back, Eric Gray can kick rocks. Like, I don't care. You know what I'm saying? But I hold him on there. Or maybe I just keep him because, I have a limited amount of space versus a best ball league. So this is the one where you have to start the 11. This is one where you have to set your lineups every week. So you have to be, adjusting basically to what's going on. And then I got guys on IR, right? So Keaton Mitchell's coming back. I'll probably sell him, to be honest with you. Michael Thomas is getting old. I'm probably selling him. Kendrick Bourne, I have to see if he goes back, depending on where he's going to go at. And then Juju. We'll just see what happens with Juju, but he's still got like a couple years left there in New England. But say they get Drake May, they get Michael Penix, they get Jaden Daniels, right? Now they're cooking again, so it's like, what do you do there? So I wonder, like, your guys' process. Like, are you guys of the mindset, like, grab the running backs as long as they're starting? If they're practice squad, they can kick rocks, right? But say if they're like backing up somebody, or even, like there's, as much as it's yucky, CEH on a bench, something like that. What are you guys' process there and holding until it's time to trade and stuff like that?
It's great that you brought this up, because we actually did one, 3 episodes ago? Maybe episode 15, 14, somewhere in there. I just looked at yearly value, right, on Keep Trade Cut, just generic dynasty value. And I wanted to look who were the biggest risers at the position from exactly 1 year ago, from when we looked at it till now. And Adam can attest, I only found one wide receiver that was worth mentioning, and it just so happens it was a guy who went off this week 18 too, and that's Nico Collins. Nico Collins was a huge riser from 1 year ago. The rest of them didn't really rise at all. If they did, they went up a few spots. More than likely, you're probably falling, because the wide receiver class is just seems like we're deep every single year of this rookie class coming in, and this year's no different. The biggest risers, right, and I thought maybe tight ends would be it, but there's so few good tight ends that actually matter, that most of the guys who do anything, like a good example, 2 years ago, we're talking Greg Dulcich did something, Daniel Bellinger did something, Chigaquanquo did something. Did they rise in a year? No, they actually fell. Because it's like, well, we thought maybe they were going to be something.
Why? Because you also get all these because everyone's chasing tight ends because it is so shallow. We bump up the next year's Bellinger, the next year's Chig, and you see that this year. How many tight ends well, some of them did it really well. Sam Laporta did well. Like
Right.
Trey ended up doing really well. McBride. But there's so many tight ends that whether they do well or not, they're new crops of rookies, similar to the receiver position where these other tight ends just get bumped down.
The biggest risers, Brandon, like to your point when you're talking about this, came at the quarterbacks, right? Because you got guys who were backups, the Gardner Minshew's, the Joe Flacco's of the world, Tommy DeVito, who wasn't on anybody's rookie ranks. Like these kind of guys all of a sudden ascend to a role where in Superflex leagues you're like, yeah, shit, I guess I'll pay a third for him. I'll give a couple fourths. I need a starter or just a spot start. So they ascend massively in dynasty value. And the other position, the position you really want to invest in, and Scott Connor's been on this for a while, is running backs. Just any running back, right? There's a potential. The biggest risers at the position all came from the running back spot. Why? Injuries. Or all of a sudden a guy like Kyron Williams, damn, Cam Akers is gone. They trade him away. He's got a massive role, and he seems to fit that scheme. And all of a sudden he goes from, I don't even remember where he was. He was in the 50s or 60s, something like that, Adam, on the 1 year ago ranks. And all of a sudden now you look and people are like, is Kyron Williams a top 5 running back in Dynasty? And it's like, all right. These are the kind of guys that you want to roster in the offseason. So fully 100% with you where, is Kendrick Bourne, does he have some value? Yeah. Could he be a depth piece and maybe a spot starter for me? Yeah. If somebody gave me a third or a fourth right now for Kendrick Bourne, here you go. Michael Thomas, same thing. Juju, same thing.
Yep.
These tight ends like Logan Thomas, Tyler Conklin, Noah Fant. Noah Fant's the interesting one because you're like, I could see a role change. Maybe he gets a little bit of value. But Alan Lazard, Tutu Atwell, Reynolds, Zay Jones, Noah Brown, like all these guys, could they be depth pieces? Yeah. Could I also just easily replace them with somebody else very similar? Yeah.
Yep.
And if I'm in the offseason and I don't have to start a lineup, I'm not worrying about depth. What do I want to roster? The Eric Grays of the world. Right?
Well, and that's
Joe Flacco's, the Gardner Minshew's. Like, I want these dudes on my roster. Because once and you said it too earlier, Brandon, you said like Eric Gray. I don't know what happens with Saquon. But if you get to, September 1st next year in 2024, Saquon's on the Giants, it's going to be the same old show. Eric Gray at best is going to be a backup. Maybe he's third string at that time. Or maybe he's on the practice squad. You know what you do? Just cut Eric Gray and you find somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think actually, because what I was going to ask you here, Brandon. So is this like every piece? Is this what the roster looks like? I think there's a part that reason I'm asking this. The way that your roster limits are is going to really affect, especially what I'm looking to do here.
Yeah. So off season they move it to 30 overall as far as spots, right? So then you can kind of move around and things like that.
Okay.
Then you have to cut it down. So then it's 25 and during the season and stuff like that. So then that's when you get creative, like you can move. I was able to move Wicks up for a game or two. He gets banged up. I'm like, all right, I can throw him on the taxi and then wait until next year and then boom, and just kind of see how he progresses. Gray is just one of those grabs at the year, the Scott Connor special, we call it basically, where it's just grab and see what happens type situation.
Grab and pray.
I also did the thing for Jaron Hall. Jaron Hall looks like complete ass. Sorry if I can't cuss on here, but I dropped Hall off the taxi squad, so he is gone. So it's just, that type of stuff. And then it's like, okay, now I got the leftovers from that's there. I got to figure out what I want to IR because if I put these guys back onto an active roster, I don't have enough spaces now. So now it's like, I don't know if I'm ready to get rid of Joe Flacco. I don't care if he's UFA. Cleveland might keep him. And I'm thinking like, I know it's a gut and maybe Adam, you might be the guy to ask, but like if Flacco continues, this guy's he's not, prolific, but he is Joey footsteps. And he also has a Super Bowl ring. He's a good general. He's a game manager, we like to call. Like he's like Peyton Manning now as he gotten older. Peyton loses his arm, but he's still a game manager. He won us a Super Bowl championship. Finally, Denver gets one. So this is where Cleveland's got a stellar defense, just like Denver had, and now they got a game manager, right? Like, wouldn't they rather have that for a couple of years than a guy that's getting paid millions? And I don't know, like if you're gonna have to Russell Wilson him or something like that. But my mindset is, I should probably see what happens with Flacco in the offseason and not try to move him unless you guys are the mindset like, no, sell Flacco now because he's 38 years old type situation. So
no, I don't think so. And I don't really think like if Cleveland won a few games, like let's say they win 2 playoff games or something, they're in the AFC title. All bets are off, I think, if something like that happens. Okay. So I don't really know. It's tough to really say right now today. If they lose the game to the Texans and it's not that close, I could see Flacco being gone. But the reason I wanted to get to the point of, you think about, you got to cut back to 25, right? So when Mike was talking about the Kendrick Bournes, and if it's a league that Mike's running, let's say with myself, where we have some of these where it's a 35-man rosters, I think about how much that's going to deplete the waiver wire. And I think it's a lot harder actually to find. They're going to exist, but it's a little harder to now replace a guy like Kendrick Bourne because everybody's rostering so many people. When you got to cut back to 25, it's actually going to be harder for you to cut from that 30 to 25 that every single one of those Kendrick Bourne types you have. And it's easier actually when you have Joe Flacco. You're going to know pretty soon. I shouldn't say pretty soon, but in a few months, you're going to have a lot clearer picture of, is Flacco even worth anything on this roster? Is he an easy cut? And they're basically guys that are easier decisions, and they're also guys that have a chance to go up in value from what you may think right now. So I think that's a great point to essentially with the way that your team is going to have to be cut down to 25. And when it's a 25-man roster, there's going to be people in the wide receiver position almost weekly that you can probably pick up. They may not be the sexiest, but they have value in best ball. So I'm a lot more willing to, knowing that about this team, shed a little more of the Kendrick Bourne types, get rid of those, and try to really swing for the fences with running backs and quarterbacks in particular.
With the Joe Flacco thing, like Eric and I just talked about this on America's Game for this past week. We looked at everybody, like everybody. But yeah. I'll say this about Joe Flacco. I do believe he's played well enough that he is going to start games for somebody next year. Now, the only other thing I know is he won't be the starting quarterback for Cleveland Browns come day one of 2024. Like, that will be Deshaun Watson. No matter what you think about Watson or how you think Flacco played, Flacco could go on and win the Super Bowl, but the keys are getting handed over to Deshaun Watson for one reason and one reason only. It's a $200 million cap hit if they move on from him. Financially, it's not going to happen. The dead cap is almost ridiculous, right? That they'd have to carry. So whether or not he stays at Cleveland, like in a capacity, you saw the Nick Foles run for my Eagles for the Super Bowl run, right? And next year, as soon as Carson Wentz was healthy, they handed it back over to Wentz. Then Wentz kind of got banged up again. They went back to Nick Foles. He goes on another run, and all of a sudden you have a massive quarterback controversy, and everything just fell off the rails from there. But even if it's not Cleveland, I think there's a situation where there's a lot of good quarterbacks potentially entering the NFL. There's a lot of teams with quarterback needs. Flacco could be a guy easily, and this is what the beauty of holding a guy like him through this offseason process is. You're going to know. You're going to know if he goes to, let me just throw out a random team, right? Like the Raiders. He goes to the Raiders as that kind of like stopgap because the Raiders drafted J.J. McCarthy with, a pick in the teens, or they trade back or whatever it is. And if Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback for week one, and from there on, we're going to see until J.J. McCarthy's ready to take over the reins. Or maybe Flacco holds him off all year, and they let J.J. McCarthy, sit behind Flacco and learn from him for a year. Whatever the case may be, I think a guy like Flacco, a guy like Gardner Minshew, these solid backup quarterbacks, these are the kind of guys, though, I'm going to roster because just like the Eric Gray thing, what Adam alluded to is we get to September and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, J.J. McCarthy's going to be the starting quarterback. Joe Flacco decided he's going to retire. Right? Like he's done. Okay, well, this is easy. Cut Flacco, I'm done. Could I have gotten a third out of it? Maybe. But what if I would have rolled into the season, with Joe Flacco starting multiple weeks for some team, and, I would have traded that away for a third? What if my quarterback situation wasn't the greatest? What if Aaron Rodgers got banged up in the preseason, or Kyler Murray pulled a hamstring, was going to miss a couple of games to start the season? Like, I would have much rather had Joe Flacco just laying around just in case, so I didn't have to go spend a third or multiple thirds or a second to try to backfill my quarterback spot. So if I'm going to roster anybody in the offseason, it's going to be quarterbacks, it's going to be running backs. And it's going to be running backs with a reasonable shot, right? I know we kind of just, Scott has coined the term any running back on a 53, but even when Eric and I look at every single depth chart, there's some running backs where I just go, nah. Like, even if this guy got a path to playing time, I've seen him with playing time or be the starter, and he's been terrible. He's been worth nothing, right? Like a Matt Breida comes to mind. Matt Breida has been filling in for Saquon Barkley multiple times over the last couple of years and done absolutely nothing with it, like been a negative. So if I'm rostering Matt Breida, I've done something completely wrong. I'm going to roster a guy like Eric Gray who could come out of nowhere and actually be reasonable. And I know if he's getting a starting opportunity, somebody will pay me something for him. Nobody's going to pay me for Matt Breida ever.
Look at a guy like Zamir White. Zamir White was, sat
There's
around
a
for
guy.
forever, right? Zamir White sat around for forever. He literally could not even get reps ahead of Jacobs. All of a sudden, Jacobs gets finally banged up at the end of his season this year. Guy's ridiculously good in this role. Why would they pay Jacobs in this UFA situation now, right? And Zamir White is like, that's an Eric Gray type situation where it's a young guy that has excitement behind him versus someone you've seen fail, right?
With that same thing, right? Yeah. As soon as Jacobs got hurt, how many people did you see rushing out to pick up Amir Abdullah or Brandon Bolden?
Right.
Nobody cared.
Because nobody cared. Yeah.
We hadn't even been it hadn't even been confirmed that they were going to give Zamir White the workload, but they're like, if there's one guy in there that could generate some buzz or some excitement or do something with his opportunity, it's Zamir White.
But the reason those other
you
guys
can rule out some of these running backs right off the cuff, though. You're like, nope.
The reason some people did chase those other ones, though, was because people are like, man, if he literally couldn't crack any snaps, like, is he just that bad? But turns out, obviously, there was way more upside. We saw with all those other guys, Amir Abdullah. How many times are we going to give Amir Abdullah a chance to show us he doesn't have winning upside, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the Boston Scott thing. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Unless he's playing the Giants for like that off game, and he didn't do anything versus the Giants this year, so we snapped that streak. But like that's the kind of guy where Swift's out, Gainwell's banged up. You're like, I'd rather run out and try to see if Rashad Penny had some juice than I would rather see if Boston Scott had some juice for this game.
So, very much the same mold. No matter what you think of him, Ty Chandler too, right? Like
there you go. Yeah,
that's what you're chasing, right? The guy that has fallen off because he's not getting any reps, any playing time. But if there was an opportunity, boom, you're looking at a whole new situation with the way the community values him.
Yep. I'm fully on board with this, though. Your off-season plan, and this is a good way to look at it, where I think you can just go through and you can go like, yeah, if an offer came, or maybe I should actively send out some offers if people want to buy these middling receivers. Right. I get the draft capital, I get the liquidity for this season, and then I can do with it as I please, whether that's actually taking these rookies or maybe using them to tier up or make some moves some other way, package them together. But the other thing, you open up all these roster spots, right? You're so up against the constraint. I know they expand to 30, like you said, but you got to get down to 25 at some point, right? So you actually do need some of those guys like the Eric Grays, right? You need multiple ones where you're like, all right, I almost kind of wish that you just let me know that you're dead and you're not worth anything. So easy, check, cut. I already got a guy marked down or tailored for a cut. Either you have a role or you don't.
I think too, I was just going to say real quick, and I'll get right back to you, Brand, is that I think in trade discussions, when you're starting to look to ship some of these guys, a lot of times that'll be something especially when I know the format and the roster situation, like 25, you got to cut down to. Those are some guys I think you could probably ask people to throw into you. Guys like Eric Gray that they probably don't care nothing about when they start to think, I'm going to get a Cooper Kupp type. I'm going to get a Tyler. Add those as little kick-ins and then get you your 30 number. You got to cut them at the end. Who cares? You can easily cut out of those guys if they don't have a role.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever leverage they need, like we talked about, sure, give me your fifth or whatever it takes to get the deal done type situation. Why not say, I don't know, man, give me like Kevin Harris. Let's see what happens with Zeke or something like that, or whatever you got to do, just throw it in there to make them feel, or maybe if you have to, say if you got these guys on the roster, because honestly, like sometimes maybe they're of the same mindset and they're just like, maybe this guy can start if, Zeke gets hurt, or maybe if, CH goes down, you can start LaMichael Pirine or whatever you got to do, basically, that type of situation. That's definitely good as well. Before we move on to the college part, because it's a different strategy when the sales, and this is a C2C podcast, so I guess we can, talk about both levels, but let's talk about best ball real quick, just because, we want to cover all bases on that when you're doing deconstruction. So for me, best ball is like, you just grab what you need to grab type situation, and you just hope that they kind of go off. But would you guys say on the mindset, are you open to having like empty spaces for in the season or in the off season in order to have what we call, I guess you could say it's more quality, bench or quality, rosters. So that way you can kind of do it. So instead of having like these practice squad guys and stuff like that, or having Case Keenum, who's like the third string on your, that type of situation? Wouldn't you rather have Davis Mills? Like, why are we keeping these people on there? What's your mindset of having a full, best ball roster versus, keeping a couple spaces open, whether that's for the draft, whether that's for in-season pickups, fab, things like that? What's your process there, would you say?
So in best ball in the off season, I always keep my rosters full, just in case, right? Because there's value. Where we're talking from a lineup lens here with a lot of these receivers who aren't going to gain dynasty value, and I'm probably not starting them in a lineup, right? But do I want to roster a Zay Jones, a Josh Reynolds, a Tutu Atwell, Alan Lazard in best ball? Hell yes, I do, right? Because they could have a week. So I'm a little bit more open, especially to these wide receivers. So I just want anybody. I want anybody with a role. Now, where I differ from lineup to best ball is maybe I don't roster as many backup quarterbacks or lawn darts or these lawn dart running backs. Like, I'm going to be more open, especially because most of the best ball rosters I do anymore are, you just saw it, right? 30 man, 35 man, 37 man rosters. Like, the waivers are bare, right? And I intrinsically know that I'm going to have 6, 7, 8 roster spots probably at any given time that I can just go, yeah, I can move on with this guy. And if anybody picked him up off waivers, it would be a miracle, right? If I really wanted him back, I can get him next week during the waiver runs for $1, almost guaranteed lock. So it's kind of already baked in, but I do want to roster him just in case there's some news that breaks, right? Somebody gets a hair. We've already said the ass word, so a hair up their ass to go get them. Somebody gets excited because hey, Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Maybe Alan Lazard's going to have a bigger role with him versus Zach Wilson, and maybe June to get some training camp buzz or some news or a mini camp throw or a highlight that gets made, and somebody's like, you know what, I should go get some Alan Lazard. Perfect. Here, I already have him rostered. Give me a third.
Yep, please take him.
Give me 2 fourths, whatever. Give me some fab. I don't care. So I'm going to keep them full, just because I bake in the fact that I'm going to have probably a handful of guys I'm going to cut on any given moment, because I'm going to churn that bottom of that roster in a best ball while I'm competing during the season anyways, right? I'm going to cycle through a lot of guys. Unfortunately for Adam and I, some of our biggest misses come from the fact that those are the guys that get churned, and then all of a sudden you get to week 2 and you're like, damn, man, can you believe I cut this dude in July and then so-and-so picked him up a couple weeks later? Damn, he locked into it. I should have kept that guy on my roster. You have some of those misses, but you end up having more like hits or more finds, and you're like, dang, look at this guy. He cracked top 5 wide receiver of the week. Nobody wanted him,
Right.
Andre Yoshavash, all of a sudden it's like, hey, he's actually out there playing something. This is awesome, right? They carry more value on a week-to-week basis. So best ball, at least for me, I keep my roster stacked and full in the off season, and I'll just keep an eye on it and monitor it through waivers, and I'll probably churn a handful of guys. And if you go and look at like sleeper history for the bottom of my best ball rosters, you're going to see a lot of guys that I'll probably cut in May, when I get the rookies in and I go, okay, we got to trim. And then you'll see like some of those rookies get cut, right? Some of those 5th round, like, dude can't even make a catch in practice. Like one-on-one drills, he looks horrible. Done, off. And then I go back and I pick up the guy that I cut him for, way back when. And it's just this repeating cycle over and over.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the history on like a sleeper, if you're on sleeper, for example, you do the history, you'll go through and look and see, man, this guy, like for example, Zamir White. He's a perfect example of a guy I held for probably a year and change, eventually dropped because I didn't want to have him as a 0. And now I'm looking, I see someone else picked him up, and I'm like, what if I would have known then what I know now, I would have kept him, obviously. But I think you keep it full. The best practice for me is keep it full. I think in the best way I would proceed moving forward is keep it full, understand when you have to cut. I think the biggest thing for a lot of leagues for me, because of I think a technicality for sleeper in particular this year, it's going to be something in any one of my leagues. I think it's a conversational piece of being a little more clear, having a vote on it. When are the cuts? When do you have to have a cut? And what's the penalty if you don't cut? Because just basically making sure that I want to have, if there's no penalty, as many people on my roster as possible. Fill it up as much as you can. And if there's not going to be a penalty, there's no reason to cut them. But I keep every single spot as full as I could at any time. I think it gives you extra shots. You might as well have them, you know?
I found one, Adam, from the OG shit league. I
What do you
found
got?
one.
You got
Tanner Hudson.
there you go.
Oh yeah.
So in 2022 September, Dwayne Wagner picked him up for $0. 6 days later, he cut him. The next day, he was picked up for $3. 2 weeks later, he was cut. I picked him up in October 25th of 2022 for $0. I cut him in December for. He was then picked up October of 23 for $0. He was cut again 11 days later, and I picked him up in November 14th of this year for $7 of fab. So this is a guy who's been passed around over and over between all the teams in there. So when you look at the bottom of best ball rosters, that's kind of the way it goes, right?
Yep.
So, but yes, to the overall theme of it, I keep them full. I keep them in the off season. I'll keep them stacked to the max.
Yeah, whatever, understanding whatever your max is and when you have to have it trimmed down by, there's no reason to, in my opinion, not have it there. Like even right after the draft, let's say you're over the limit. When do I have to cut these guys down by? Just know that, you know, and I just keep the excess until I have to have it off.
Till you got to trim, right?
Yep.
Whatever. If it's a league rule that you got to be cut down by this day, boom. If it's a sleeper league where, like one of us, we don't have those rules in any of our leagues, so you wanted to carry an extra 15 guys into the season, you know, might be shady to some, but you just can't make waivers while you got 15 over, right? Sleeper doesn't allow it. So do you on that front, but I keep my rosters full.
I got you. All right, boys, let's talk about some CFF Dynasty, right? I know we're going into the weeds on this one, but this is helpful because this is also deconstruction, but this is on your college side of things. Now, strategy on the NFL side, you can apply some of it, but most of it is going out the window, right? So because college is so big, especially if you're playing 133 teams, right? 134 next year with Kennesaw State, by the way. So we're ever expanding NCAA to go along with it, but there usually is more as far as like you play two quarterbacks. So it's definitely super flex, just like you have in most ones. So in the best ball, you have that one on the bottom there on sleeper or whatever. This one is like a lot of these leagues, it's a mandatory you play two quarterbacks regardless, right? So you got a lot of that one. Now, the ever-changing landscape of college is that we have now the transfer portal, right? So that changes things going with it. This is free agency for college on that one as well. So literally, I would say about a month ago, Dylan Gabriel played for the Oklahoma Sooners. Thought I was probably going to loot him. Guess what? He has a graduate transfer, and guess where he's going? Oregon. Guess who I also drafted in my first round, the previous one? Dante Moore. He was playing at UCLA as a starter. Didn't do so hot under Chip Kelly, but guess who he's going to replace? I now have the entire backfield of the Oregon Ducks, which is fantastic because, one, we talked about systems. This is a Will Stein system, and he balls out with his quarterbacks, and he makes sure that they goes to the draft. So Gabriel might actually have a shot at the NFL, regardless if it's a backup role. He still will have a shot next year by playing for the Ducks than he would playing for Oklahoma, even though Jeff Levy is a pretty decent coach within his own right. So having these prolific wide receivers that are still transferring over to Oregon or has flipped as far as a commitment, stuff like that. Oregon is stacked for probably 3 to 4 years to come when it comes to wide receivers. Now, when it comes to quarterbacks and they still got Austin Novosad, who hasn't made a decision if he wants to transfer out or not. So you now have 3 studs at quarterback at Oregon who could then, transcend for the least the next, Gabriel for a year, but the next 5 years. So things change constantly. Also, you can't be, you have a lot more bigger roster. So this one is a 50-man, right? So you got a lot of stuff on there as well. But there's guys that you have freshmen, there's juniors and stuff like that. So there's ones that you have from previous ones. And you also have guys that, I also leave empty because I'm waiting for them. I also have it down here where you also can look and wait and see who's in the transfer portal, who's going where, things like that. So I try to keep a track of that so you know where you're going. So then you can kind of make these decisions. Also, when it comes to CFF and C2C, you have people that go to the NFL. So if this was a true C2C, I play in Dynasty and CFF. It doesn't really translate over to an NFL roster. So I'm losing 17 spots. That's all in this green if you're watching YouTube. If you're not, basically I have color coded on this spreadsheet. It's labeled in green. Those are guys that are declared for the NFL. I'm losing some big boy names. Drake May, right? Ramon Davis, Leggett, I'm losing Jamari Thrash from Louisville. Will Shipley, who just tore his ACL, still going to go to the NFL because he's been told he's going to get a high draft grade. That also leads me to believe that Henderson will probably leave OSU and will likely go there, especially when they have our boy Judkins, who's now in the portal and has been he's trying to get a bag there in Ohio State because Maserati Marv said, "No, I'm good. I'm going to the NFL." Right.
Yep.
So it's like he's like, "I'm good." But I'm losing depth. At the tight end position, I had Jared Wiley from TCU. Tanner McLaughlin, who was from Arizona. So literally I have one guy at tight end. So that looks like the guy that I'm going to probably look at focusing in this upcoming, because when it comes to C2C or CFF, you have freshmen and you have supplemental, right? So you have guys that either coming up from the FCS, they transfer from different schools and now they have a better opportunity. I have those listed, and for my purposes of strategy, I will not show them, but just know that I have them and already have targets, and I also have them ranked because you can move these different positions on sheets. So it's a good thing you can move them around the way you want, things like that. So you can actually rank them by doing it that way. So what I looked at is starting lineup. This is the time where instead of age, like you do in NFL, you look at the year that they're at. So we're finally getting to the end of this COVID extra years and graduate transfer years. So we're getting to the point to where it's like, eventually it's just going to go back to just 4 years and you're done. And maybe you might be granted a graduate transfer. So maybe a 5th year. But guys, for example, like JT Daniels, who got disqualified, like he's not able to play anymore. He's played at 7 different schools, right? Started at Georgia, worked his all the way to Rice, right? And then now he can't play football anymore. Sucks for him as well. So he's immediately like a cut candidate, for example. So it's different because, in NFL, you have, best ball and stuff like that. You still have a certain amount of strategy, whereas this one is a big boy league. It's like 50 plus players. Who are you starting and stuff like that? It comes down to like understanding who you have left and understanding the depth that you have as far as wide receiver, things like that. So I know you guys are kind of, newer to C2C, but it sounds like you guys did pretty well, even in your first couple of seasons there. What would you say is something that you've learned, just, open discussion, stuff like that, as far as like replacing? I mean, when it comes to CFF, it's a lot more of a waiver wire type situation, and FAB is important more than anything. So if you are going to trade, whether that's NFL to college, or if you're doing college to college, whatever that you're preferring or whatever, throwing in some FAB for a trade would be really good, especially in these waivers, because the more FAB you have, the better you're going to be. Because some leagues, some C2C limits you as far as one, and CFF Dynasty, it's every single week. So basically, you're just literally scrapping with your league mates, basically, to try to get these guys off that one. Someone pops off, you grab them. So like Brendan Presley used to be great 2 years ago, fell off. The system resets itself. Now Brendan Presley is a senior coming back for a 5th year, and he's a boss. So now he's back in the lineup and stuff like that. So you got to go grab him on waivers because he was dropped 2 years ago, things like that. So what have you guys learned, in the process of transitioning to like a C2C in college and things like that so far?
So the biggest one for me, Adam, in the last 2 years has just been how irrelevant the tight end position is. And to Brandon's point, like most of these tight ends that I'm going to find, like this year was the first year in our South Harmon League that we had a waiver period, right? So we had the supplemental draft, right? We did that all. We didn't have waivers the first time, right? So what you drafted was what you got, and a lot of people were terrible at tight end, like they couldn't do anything. So if you want to talk like college warp, I can guarantee, like we saw some Travis Kelce graphs from 2022 and just how much higher he was than everybody else for the NFL side. I can guarantee, like the Brock Bowers of the world, those guys were just lapping the field because everybody else was garbage. They were terrible. They weren't putting up fantasy points. So this year we had a waiver period. And that, at least for me, was a huge priority. It was like, okay, we're 6 weeks in, or 5 weeks in, whenever we ran that waiver period. I'm going, all right, let me go look at tight ends. Man, there's like 2 dudes that matter, and both of them are free agents. I need to make sure I land one of these guys right now. How important the FAB was, or how important being able to acquire one of those guys, especially at tight end. Overall, the position's terrible, right? Like you have Terrence Ferguson up here, great name, but you also have listed as fantasy points 8.74, right? Like highly replaceable, just with somebody else.
Too. Right. Goes to show how much they use receivers.
That's I think for me kind of like extending that point for me, right? Okay, so I had Jatavian Sanders and a lot of spots. Now, I would say with him, you got a little lucky towards the end, and I think he's a good name for the NFL side. But I think realistically, I don't want to shoot as many shots on those type of tight ends, because the problem, like to Mike, you're highlighting, if you had, let's say, guys that you're hoping for NFL success for down the road at the tight end position, and you don't have enough total roster spots, you could basically be looking at giving yourself almost weekly zeros or close to it, right? At a position. I think probably when you start going to the waiver wire, for me, what I'm going to try to do, and I don't know if we have a chance to, like, if you could look at this in this league, Brandon, but what kind of small school guys, how far can you go down, and what kind of production can you kind of just say, this is not someone that I ever care about to the NFL side, but it's like a floor level production or any type of production that I can just have more shots at the dartboard at the tight end position for me. That's a huge one. I think in general, though, I'm going to be, if I want to be competitive on the college side, I'm looking at, I guess if you were to look at like this starting lineup, you have the points from the fantasy points total, right?
Right.
What kind
this is like projected what I look at 2024. This is without my guys like May and those guys that I had previously in the lineup. Like, so this is removing it. This is like me looking at like, okay, this is third place. I made 2 bad mistakes. I just didn't trust my gut. I was, 7-3. I lost to my buddy Jared, who is our CFF. He's our fearless leader on the team on that one. So he took it home, but he went from last place to first. I went from like second to last to third. So these are teams where like we worked hard in the off season, sometimes we'll talk, but most of the strategies are on our own and we perceive different things separately. So for me, this is me projecting who I have. Guys like Luther Burden is one of my cornerstones. Like, am I going to probably trade Luther Burden? Probably not. But a guy like Colin Lacey, who is the guy that came from South Alabama, now upticking, and he's taken over the Jamari Thrash role. Like, I'd be open to moving him to get another first round. So because we got to keep in mind, this is freshman and supplemental, right? So it's like you could take a good freshman with one of your picks. So I was third place. So I'm going to be, there's 14 teams in there. So it's a big boy, league type situation, but there's plenty of waivers to go around, but you want to try to hit in the first. That's the big thing that Austin and all those guys will tell you there at C2C. Hitting on your supplemental and freshman guys in the first like 5 rounds is probably the most important. That way you're not, swinging and missing. And then everyone else is literally just taking your shot on your guys type situation. But I can move Lacey and maybe get a higher round, and then we can use the tier down method. It's just we don't have anything to go off. There's no keep trade cut. There's no anything like that. Maybe there can be something like that in the future. That's what we're hoping for. Yeah. That's something in the background that Jarek and others and things like that are trying to figure out. Whoever gets to it first is going to have a gold mine, right? So it's going to be like who can get there first and who can make like a reasonable thing. So, but for me, like Lacey would be considered like maybe I can get him for a second, and maybe I'll grab like an upcoming guy out of Oregon, or maybe I'll take him. Maybe I'll go for Concepcion there at NC State, who blew it up as a freshman. He's got 3 years left, so you're looking at underclassmen instead of going to these juniors and seniors and stuff like that. So that's an option that you can kind of take type situation. And I agree with the tight ends. Like, none of these guys, I picked them up. And that's something that I'll tell you, like, I never drafted a tight end in a freshman supplement. I literally picked them up on waivers. And that's kind of the way you kind of have to take it. And like you're saying, sometimes the most obscure ones, like Tanner Colzier from Ball State, right? I don't know if this guy is going to make it in the NFL. He might. He's got great hands, but like he plays in the MAC, so no one plays defense there. And that dude is like 6'7", and he's got a good mismatch. So I'm gonna take him, who gives me like 11 points a game, maybe over Ferguson, who gets overlooked because there's like 5 options on the Oregon offense right now that you can throw to. So you gotta think about this stuff when you're starting to deconstruct and then construct it back for the next season.
Yeah, I think yours is a little different too, right? Because it's not the C2C, like right? How we think of it.
So this would be like what 17 guys that I would have on my NFL roster. Me, I like drafting, boys. Like I like rookie drafts, like freshman drafts. So do I play in C2Cs? I play in like 1 or 2, to be honest with the rest of them. I separate them. I like CFF Dynasty. I like NFL 100%. Dynasty. And then you have your redrafts and, best balls and things like that. So money is money, right? But this is the ones like I like to definitely separate them. So then the strategy can kind of be different, basically.
So it's something I only play in C2C leagues too, just because I like to do both together, right? College fantasy is still a little bit out there for me, right? But when I look at it, you asked, one of the things I learned is, like, just because a guy has potential NFL value towards me, and like how you rank him, how high value, doesn't mean he's shit for the college side as far as scoring points. Because Adam, I could go and look at our league. We're talking about the tight end position. There's dudes on this list for like top points per game scorers, and I'm not just talking they played like one game and got hurt. I'm
Sure.
talking they played a whole season.
Yep.
You know, their total points is up there with everybody else in the world. And I'm like, I don't know who the hell this guy is.
No,
Right?
absolutely.
But when you talk about fab, like at the position, right? If you had a Terrence Ferguson, I would just say the scoring was the same. I know it's probably a little bit different because I'm pretty sure we got a tight end premium and some bonuses and all that stuff that goes into it. But you're looking at a Terrence Ferguson. For me, he would have a little value because, like, I love his athletic profile. I like the size, and I'm going, it's Oregon. You know, maybe he's got an NFL future. For college fantasy, I'm like, this dude is a zero. Like, if this is all I was playing, I could cut this dude in a heartbeat and pick up a guy like Harold Fannin from Bowling Green.
There you go. Now you're talking.
Like, this is a dude I never heard of, but I go and I look at it, I'm like, he scored 16 fantasy points per game.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I was gonna say about the like when you went down and you're saying all these guys are going to the NFL, right? And I don't know what your number of rosters you totally have to kind of replace to, what you have draft picks for, but
yeah, so there's 17 going, and then usually like we do like 16 rounds. Some C2Cs and CFF ones are different, right? So I know like out of this one, and then I'm still waiting on Nanadine Mitchell. If he declares, then that's 18, right? So I'm thinking I can replace at least 16 roster spots, regardless if it's supplemental guys or freshman guys, right? That's what I'm hoping, because now your roster gets younger. That's another benefit of playing CFF versus the NFL. Is like you get more opportunity to kind of rebuild quicker and have a good turnaround, like we did, you know, last year with me and Jared going from the bottom to the top, basically. Like you can reset. That's where it kind of comes in handy. But
yeah,
other than that, like you know, you just got to keep it pushing. You know.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think with the guy who's doing as extensive deep dives as you are on all the schools, while it is still the wild, wild west, right? While there is no keep, trade, cut type of a thing that says, all right, we have 300 some schools. Actually, it's not in, that's in the college basketball. I don't know how many are in the FBS and the NCAA football.
Yeah, 133, 134 next year.
134. Okay, so there's 134 schools across all. Nobody has any idea for once you probably get to the mid-major level, right? Like the MAC schools. So those I think for you, if you can look at, okay, this guy was really good in his sophomore or junior season, and his production, if anything, is probably taking a step forward, or at least going to be in this range of dependable, if not maybe a cheat code in a points per game relative to guys who are chasing NFL upside. I think that's where this time of year, or especially as you get closer to the season trying to fill spots, that's where I think you can probably, with your expertise, or the more you grind, I should say, like the more you're actually looking and thinking about all these different deep dives, that's such a huge advantage, I think, in a format like this.
Yeah.
I like it too, because I just had to pull this up at him, and I'm looking at some, right? Like, you know who Dylan Gabriel is, Haynes King, I know who he is, right?
Sure.
You know, Dante Moore, Connell Harrell.
But do you call it Conley?
Yeah, unfortunately, I know who JJ Cole is. Hate Iowa State with a passion, but when I look at it, how like we approach it from like I need a little bit of NFL value or potential upside, especially when we just talk quarterbacks. Where like I kind of want to roster you, but because here's the thing, I can go find guys who probably have no NFL future whatsoever who are going to score fantasy points for the college side, right?
Exactly.
Like there are dudes out there. I don't know who the hell Chandler Rogers out of North Texas is, but I look at him, his points per game is on par with what Michael Penix and Cam Ward did in our league at him, right?
Yeah.
And this dude's still sitting out there in free agency. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things is I think there might be a big edge when you look at this from just a college fantasy. And I think this is probably why you can turn stuff around so well and you do so well. If you can predict or know where the production might come from and separate yourself from the name value, right? When you understand that I don't care that Chandler Rogers probably will never play an NFL snap ever.
Yep.
But he's going to score me 30 fantasy points per game at the quarterback position. Sign me up.
Well,
like,
and I think one little external or extrinsic factor to this is, what do you know if you're chasing the NFL side? Okay, you may take a little bit to see the points per game. Maybe you get 1 points per game year that's like juiced if everything goes really well. That's probably going to be the junior year as they go to declare. Guess what? It's unlikely Quali Conley, who I would have known his name. I have seen him play the running back. All right. Guess what he's probably not doing, or most of those guys are probably not doing, is they're not declaring, because they're hoping to get to the NFL if everything hits right after their senior season or after their red shirt. You have more time to let, if that's production as a sophomore, you can probably sit there and say to yourself, man, unless he gets hurt, I have production coming junior and senior season too. You don't have to worry about that leap to the NFL. that is going to take away possibly the production. Whereas if you held him from his freshman year, and then he doesn't play, he starts to show things that as a freshman. Then he starts to blossom as a sophomore. Maybe you get one full season on the college side of really good production, and then he's gone to the NFL.
Right. Yeah, that's something that, when you're looking at both styles of league. So if it's the C2C, like 17 players, that means you did really well. That means you held on to some good players, but you still have, something to kind of carry on. When it comes to CFF Dynasty, like that mindset is completely gone, right? So it's like, who is the next man up? What system fits? So we're talking about systems again. We're also looking at opportunities. So like Kyrie Robinson was the big guy at San Jose State, but even Conley started getting in on that. And this is his junior season now. Conley becomes a senior. This is his time to shine, right? Mm-hmm. San Jose State likes to run the ball. So that's where the hope is. That's like this guy who worked his way up into my starting lineup because of losing Will Shipley and losing Ramon Davis, those guys that are now going to the NFL. Conley could be the next man up. There's, Marion Lukes, the guy that was placed in Lou Nichols, who Lou Nichols is on, I don't know, some practice squad. I think the Jets or something like that. I'm not quite sure where he's at now, but he was a CFF darling. He was like top three.
My Philadelphia Eagles, baby.
Is he on the Eagles? There we go.
On the Eagles.
I knew he was on the green team. That's all I remember, basically. Looking on Sleeper. I was like, Nichols is on the waivers. I was like, man, this ain't CFF anymore. And I'm trying to keep my, he used to be top 3 in CFF, but Central Michigan produces really great running back quality and stuff like that. So now Luke's, who now has, come in as the junior, now as a senior. So now you have that type of situation. So it's churn and burn. You only have, think of this as like a fast track version of NFL Dynasty, but instead of having like, if you're lucky, like Tom Brady, like 20 something years or something like that, you got like 3 tops. And if you're lucky, right, if you're lucky for some of these studs too, because they'll come in and they'll do really well, and then they're gone. You'll be lucky if they redshirt, graduate transfer. So that's where a lot of times CFF, we look at a lot of the guys that are like seniors and juniors, knowing a lot of them may not have an NFL future, but they might graduate transfer, or they might say, let me get a better opportunity. So they'll come up from like a Georgia State, like Jamari Thrash to Louisville. Same thing with our guy, Colin Lacey now, who's now going to be a senior. He moves up to Louisville and taking the spot of Jamari Thrash. Like that's the stuff you want to look at when it comes to the CFF. And, you have to understand, like, you can still take your guys, and then we're talking C2C now, like, it's okay to go after the guys that you want to. So everyone's going to look at Jeremiah Smith. He's the freshman that we're going to talk about, coming in because he's coming to Ohio State. A lot of NIL money, probably going to start. Some of these guys from Ohio State has transferred out. Adam, you probably know more about that, being in Ohio. Or being an Ohio fan. I don't know where you're exactly at, but I know you're an Ohio guy. But
yeah,
Jeremiah Smith is the guy to look at because he's a man amongst boys when you look at him in the high school level. So imagine when he goes and plays in the Big Ten. Big Ten's a much bigger, badder, conference, but who's to say he doesn't become the guy there? Now we have Howard there at Ohio State, so things are shaping up and things like that. So he might be the guy because someone's going to replace Marv and Ibuka if he's still coming out. Like now you got the change, Brandon Ennis. You have the guy that's waited. He was the year 1-0 we talked about. Most of those guys don't translate, but when we look back, you can look at it on campusofcan.com. But like there are some names in there that were 1 year zeros that produced and are still playing in the NFL today, like a Juju Smith-Schuster and those guys. Yeah, they've fallen off recently, but at the height of their things, Juju on the Steelers, Juju at KC, like in a good spot, they blew up, right?
Once upon a time, Juju was dynasty wide receiver 1, baby.
He was, and now he's debatable for a 3rd or 4th round pick.
Well, I think to that Ohio State point, like you could look pretty recently for me. You had a guy, he ended up not playing for Ohio State, but like look at Jamison Williams. Jamison Williams, they didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden he goes to Alabama and 1,600 yards, right? Like that could be somebody that happens for Ohio State too. Some of the guys there don't have the opportunity because there's so many good receivers in front of them, and all of a sudden they get an opportunity in that offense, and their talent really shows.
I love it too. I think the cool thing about the college fantasy football and like when you're doing this like a dynasty league is I think just me personally, I'm sitting here thinking like, how the hell would I strategize to make myself most successful? And I do some NFL corollaries. We were talking earlier, at least on the NFL side, like how do you want to roster in the offseason and, what positions hit? Like Adam and I can agree there's only 32 NFL teams, right? And there's only 53 men who make an active roster, and then you get injuries and practice squad call-ups or whatever, but you dive into these guys deep, right? Like we know, there's a reason when Eric does his deep dives for America's Game, it's 2.5 hours, 3-hour shows, and that's just doing one conference, going through every roster. But like these guys. We talked earlier. There's 134 Division One teams. There's 134 with 90-man rosters, right? Like,
Yep.
there's going to be even more people who come out of nowhere, no matter the amount of grinding you're doing in the off season or the amount of work or scouting, film watching, looking at whatever data source that you want. I would think that if I'm going to strategize for a college fantasy football dynasty league where there's no NFL implications whatsoever, the biggest thing is going to be my fab budget and making sure that I have the hammer. And I think a lot of people would overlook that, right? Unless you're a diehard, like I'm sure in some of these leagues where people have been doing it for a while, like the really ones who strategize, they know how important it is, right? Somebody comes asking for $10 of fab in a trade for you, you tell them to piss off.
What I was actually going to ask you
giving
that.
it up.
What is
Not a
the
chance.
what is the situation as far as the running of fab? Is it what does the waivers look like? Is it run weekly? Is it like what's your situation for that?
It varies. So like the C2C purist, I like to call them. So the guys like Austin, Bruning, those guys, they only allow you like 4 times during the year. So like usually like week 4, week 8, and I think week 12. Maybe they throw an extra one like week 2. I forget. But basically it's like a 4 time period. So you have to be on your mark as far as who do you want to grab and who you're doing it. But most of the time there's not a lot of movement waiver wise because a lot of guys are locked in like this is my NFL prospect and stuff like that. Guys like Alfred and those guys on the scouting team who, I usually have on like the first part of the usually the first episode or so of my podcast as we start to break down the freshmen and the opportunity and what it's looking like as far as like, can they break out in year one, or is this going to be a waiting game, or is this, what's the strategy there? Like they usually are like the ones to kind of dig into, like, is it possible for them to kind of be worth this waiver? I'm saying from the get-go, from a freshman year, right? You don't want to miss because that's where it hurts the most. CFF Dynasty, it's like, kind of like what Mike has, where it's just like it's wide freaking open. You know what I'm saying? Like they give you more. So instead of like say if you're doing like 100 or whatever, we do like 1,000. So you have to kind of strategize and stuff like that.
$1,000
like,
budget. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, like people are paying up like $50-$60 for these guys. Like for me, like I've never drafted a tight end. I've always picked them up, and it's always been like $5, $4. Because if you can find the breakout, and that's just whatever how much time you have. Like this comes down to like strategy and stuff like that, and this is just an episode for everybody to be like, you can be this meticulous, or you can at least just have these thought processes in your head. You don't have to put it down on paper or on virtual type like stuff. Tight ends don't really matter in CFF, or what I'm saying, like grab one off the waivers, spend as less money, but if you can get to the breakout first, like a Jared Wiley at TCU broke out in like week 1, what I'm saying, a lot of people are like, oh sweet, so they went to it. You don't get to get him because he gets sold for like someone's grabbing him for like $100 of their $1,000. He spent 10% of their their fab type situation. I'm gonna wait until he has a down week and wait till someone drops him, which it happened, and then I grabbed him for literally like $5 off the waiver wire or something like that, right? So it's like I want to make you pay, wait for you to not win, because here's the thing: like you churn and burn so quickly because there's so many players on that, on the players that you can pick up. Literally, it's just like, I'm going to go find, the Tanner Colzier. I'm going to go find, what's his name? Fannin from, from these MAC conferences. I'm just going to grab him for like $2 because I'm seeing where it's like 17 fantasy points per game. Maybe it's 3 games in or whatever. But that's a lot better than this Tanner Ferguson guy that got that's like 8 points here. He's going to go to the bench. I'm going to go grab this guy from Bowling Green.
Man, I think the way I would play it, I'm weird. I'm odd in a lot of different ways. I'll be the first to tell you that. So I'm a small school junkie as it is in general because I played Division II basketball. I love focusing when I was betting, still betting on the small schools. I don't think I have this weird view that I know they want to put the line as close as they can, but they're not going to put as many minds and setting lines for small school games as they are going to be put for the big Power 5, where they're going to have a lot more people betting, right?
Yeah, it's easy to take the FCS championship versus the FBS tonight, for example. Yeah,
exactly. For sure. And I think that if I know that the NFL, whatever happens after college is irrelevant, like it's basically what Mike and I's process is in the dynasty landscape, and for this college format would be for me. This whole school column, I'll keep it up there, but in my mind, you could delete that.
You could
delete it, and I think the reason I say that is I want to separate myself from the names. And what tends to happen is people like to attach themselves to the names, the ones they really like. That's cool, but what does this points column look like? Mm-hmm. If you play at Oregon and it's a great school that has huge upside for scoring, cool. But am I holding someone like that thinking they're going to score all these points when maybe a guy that's playing for North Texas, Ball State, Central Michigan, whoever it may be, is actually scoring already as many points, maybe even a little more. Why don't I would rather have that guy anyway? So my roster would probably look a lot more like UMass, Louisiana Lafayette, a lot of these types, as long as the points per game were aligning.
Yep. You do have to take in factor. Here's another thing for CFF, like the system does matter. So that's where you probably keep the school name, right? Because if it's Alabama, that's, turn and burn all running backs there, right? Quarterbacks, regardless if Milroe didn't have the greatest game there in the playoffs, like Milroe next season, dialed in, maybe, a little bit more of a different offseason to hang out with his boys. Like Milroe is going to probably be like a top 10 CFF quarterback. You know what I'm saying? So it's
Sure.
like, he's the target. Like, so that's the time where you maybe don't remove the team name, because sometimes the team name, especially in CFF, holds more value to where you can move them if you want to, or you can ask, the king's ransom, as we talk about the Puka Nakua price, whatever you got to do basically to
Sure.
get it done. So
yeah, I'm not saying to like just forego value or get rid of guys from. My point is more so like that's a little more ancillary. And I'm not saying don't chase guys in Alabama or Oregon, but I'd be a little more hesitant to do that depending on the cost if I could get a lot more $5 pickups like you had for
there you
guys that are going to give you production, right?
I get exactly what you're saying, right? If you were working on this $1,000 budget, right? A.D. Mitchell would be the guy, right? He's got a name. We thought he was doing something, but if anybody wanted to buy him at all during the season, he's not actually scoring fantasy points that matter, right? This is where College Warp would come into. You could honestly see he'd probably be wide receiver 60,
That'd be
70.
so sweet to see College Warp, man. Oh my gosh, it'd be
Right,
awesome.
like in an extremely flat tier, and it'd be like, I will sell you A.D. Mitchell for $100 in Fab.
And that's another thing. Like
gone.
Mitchell had the stink of Georgia on him, right? So it's like, other than Lad McConkey, who's going to be a beast at the next level. I do like Lad a lot, but he's a good lad. But there's only so much Georgia can do at that one, regardless if it's Carson Beck or Bennett, whoever that was there, basically. But like A.D. Mitchell, like no one was touching him for the first 3 or 4 weeks, but he was getting more receptions than Xavier Worthy, who's this high prospect as well. So everyone's like on the C2C side, I was like, let me have Worthy. Mitchell can kick rocks. Well, in CFF, I'm looking at like a wide receiver from Texas who our boy, Quinn Ewers was targeting on frequently. And people are like, they weren't grabbing him. This was like week 6, guys. This is week 6. This is like after the Alabama game where he caught the touchdown. He was still on the waivers. So you go and grab him for like 10, 15 bucks. And that's a wrap, Throw him in the lineup. And I've used him like 3 or 4 times during the season.
One other point I was going to make about the school name too, I think, because I agree a lot, Brandon, with what you said, right? The system does matter. And obviously can be a big correlation to what your upside and ceiling looks like. But the other thing I think that you got to keep in mind, or everybody, when you're looking at a college, if you had a college team like this, for me anyway, I think sometimes we can over project that, where it's like, okay, we want this guy, we think he's going to take this leap into that high end role. But with the transfer portal, like how many guys end up being in that situation? What if the situation could change via the coaching staff, or it could change also via a new influx of players? Ohio State, if you think you're chasing that, guess what? They got the number 1 wide receiver as a incoming freshman coming in. There's all types of situations changing, even in the situation that you're looking at right now today, right?
Yeah. Here's a good example, like just on the roster, so we all can do visual. If you're on YouTube, if not, I'll explain it to you. So Boston College has Thomas Castellanos, really good running quarterback, needs to work on his throwing. I'm sure he'll be okay. But I had Lewis Bond here from Boston College. I'm an ACC guy, being a Tar Heels fan, so I understand. I pay more attention to your conference than you do the rest of them, if that makes sense, right?
Sure.
Especially if you're trying to win your best balls. And that's important. Know your conference. But Lewis Bond was the guy that was breaking out. So he's the one that's 14.29 fantasy points per game. Well, the guy that I did have, who was at Texas Tech, just went to Boston College in a transfer portal, and that's Jared Brantley, who's a big boy, 6'7", 6'8", good hands, but like, Texas Tech just kind of fell off. Well, now he is considered. And then guess who else came to Boston College? What was his name? The one from Alabama, Brooks or whatever, the one that was Jacory Brooks.
Yep.
And he's supposed to be, hot sauce. Honestly, I think that Jaron Brantley becomes the wide receiver 1. Well, that pecking order, Lewis Bond, he's a guy that I'm looking at. Like if I'm thinking about, you can just drop him, to be honest with you, type situation, or I could try to see if anyone in the league, most of the guys is on the C2C team or play in CFF or have for a long time. So they're probably going to realize like they'll throw me a 15th round or 16th round. Honestly, I'll take it. You know what I'm saying? That's an extra draft pick. That's another freshman. That's
Right.
another guy on the list that I won't show, as far as my, these guys from supplementals that have been transferred. Like we talked about, like now they're at a new school, the one where they've been on the players one because they're like, they did get a shot because of whatever NIL, or maybe someone paid someone else extra, or there was promises that weren't kept, and so they just dip out and go to another school. So even my own school, the Johnson brothers, Max and Josh Johnson, and Max Johnson's probably got a good start because my boy, Connor Harrell didn't play so hot in the bowl game, right? So it's like I have Harrell. Would I want Max Johnson? Probably, right? So he's a guy I'm looking at. But his brother is a 4-star tight end who was backup at ATN or Texas A&M, but they already had a guy that was, starting in the tight end spot with Connor Wegman. So it's like now you have the stud coming in. So now Carolina will probably line up Bryson Desbit and Josh Johnson. Now you have this big boy tight end set, and a brother that knows his brother has probably played with him for multiple years, throughout college, high school, Pee-wee, whatever.
Yeah.
And there we go. So that's where things change for the better. Whereas like they were at a school where they weren't being used. So there's a mix and match where you lose value here. And then, like Lewis Bond is, almost like low, draft capital, or he's a droppable guy. And then you guys got the, ones that are there. Another example of guys that stay, like there's one down here, like Cody Epps. I call him the Puka Nacua replacement. He's been banged up this past year. Kind of reminds me similar of Puka, where he like got banged up. He didn't have a great quarterback. I don't know. I forgot it was, but I forgot who just transferred over there, but it's a decent quarterback that knows how to sling it. So I wouldn't say Zach Wilson-esque, but at least someone that can get Cody Epps the ball. And Cody Epps has that type of style like Puka and things like that. That's a guy that you want to keep around because BYU's now better on an uptick, for example. So
there you go. Love that.
Change,
love that. Yeah.
Or they can stay the same depending, or you just keep them holding that things change because of the transfer portal or because of commitments or whatever, or coaching changes, and it pays off. So
yeah,
and that's the difference.
Borget's transferring to BYU. I had to look that up.
Oh, okay.
I watched Borget sling it this past week.
Yeah, he did all right.
He could throw the football. That's nice.
I just think of like I forget who was. I don't remember. I feel like I can't remember the name, but there was a guy that was you're hoping was going to take over the backfield for Bama, and then you see all of a sudden, Jahmyr Gibbs comes over, and you could put that to bed.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that where you're projecting like, all right, I'm kind of sitting on this. Like, how many people probably in a situation like this might have sat on that running back in a best ball type format of this? You're like, man,
for 2 years at least. Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm rostering this situation. Like, you're rostering that name. You're rostering Alabama. Like, this is gonna have a chance to break this league open. And guess what? The situation did, but it was a guy named Jahmyr Gibbs. It wasn't the guy you're rostering, right? So I think that's where I would just be obviously hesitant about, depending on the cost of doing that too often, would be the thing I'm trying to say.
I do think after doing this, right, like there's no way I'll be able to do it for 40 dynasty leagues. Just don't have the patience.
No.
Hell no. This is some deep dive.
I don't
stuff,
do 40. This is some deep dive. This is literally just
right,
mind focus, understanding. Yeah, it's just breaking.
But I can tell you 2 leagues where I'll definitely pull this up and do it this offseason. It's going to be my C2C leagues, right?
There you go.
It's going to be my C2C leagues for the sole purpose of, right, you have that down there. What's going to the NFL? I need a good visual that I can easily see. Like, what is moving on to my NFL team as well? Because not only I'm affecting 2 separate rosters here. 1, trying to compete on the college side, but then 2, how's my NFL roster going to look when I add Drake May, Ramon Davis, Xavier Leggett, Will Shipley, one of these tight ends. Listen, I haven't done a deep dive on Sanat or Jared Wiley. They both played very well this year, and I just know them from the college side, but I don't know what their tape looks like or what their actual NFL prospects are. But these are 2 guys where, you could see 2 tight ends stepping in 1 or 2 years, mattering for the NFL side as well. So, Ladd McConkey, like, this is the kind of stuff that you're going to want to know for both sides. What do I need to replace? And for us, when you do these, you talk about like these waiver periods, and I don't know how we're going to do this where it seems fair and valid. That's a podcast
I recommend
episode.
keeping it wide open. It's more fun that way. But like I said, you have those that are just like, well, this is my prospect and I want to hold on to as long as possible.
Right.
I understand, I get it. For me, I like it wide open, just like you do in your best balls. Like, I just want there to be fluidity. I want there to be strategy. I just want there to be, a community where you can kind of come and go, and then you can trade as you please, basically.
But that's also the thing for like thinking about how you want to approach the offseason. Supplemental draft is going to be the roster construction of the college side is going to be so important. And this is why this deconstruction at the end comes in. Because if I got, in this situation, I had 3 tight ends moving on, and the only tight end I have left on my roster is Terrence Ferguson. I need to figure out a way, if I want to be competitive on the college side, to put some tight ends on, because maybe I don't have a waiver pickup time until week 5, week 6 of the season. Maybe that's the first one that opens up, and I'm not going to go 5 or 6 weeks with just Terrence Ferguson, right?
No,
just a guy who's going to be probably a 0 or less than a 0.
And that's where the supplemental targets matter, man. That's where it matters the most.
These deeper leagues, Adam, for us, that IDP best ball, where we got 66 roster spots.
It's basically this, actually. Like, on the defensive side especially, it's going to be basically this.
Well, think about it, too, like how he had it listed, which I thought was interesting when we were talking about the NFL side. When you talk like that IDP league, it would be very helpful to know that the guy who was slotting in as my linebacker 2 is an unrestricted free agent, right? And may not be back in that role next year. Do I need to figure out how to replace that? Yes. And, for most IDP leagues, we always kind of joke. For those of you who don't know, ours is very different. Adam can attest the scoring is juiced to the max. I think we had a 140-point game from Khalil Mack this year. Right?
Insane.
Yeah. Now we're starting 25 spots. So, in the grand scheme of it, okay, maybe he didn't outright win your week, but he also ate up like 6 other spots, even in a best ball league where it's like, okay, I could have had 6 zeros and I still would have beat you head to head because Khalil Mack dropped 140. So knowing, what positions you got to replace in that kind of league is going to matter a whole lot. And I would say the same thing for my C2C leagues, like knowing what I'm going to do between the rosters, between college and NFL, this would be massive for me. Or like you were talking about earlier, Brandon, if you got a league that's really important to you, one that you want to win, like deconstructing at the end and kind of having a feel of how's this going to look. Can I get an idea of like what can go, what needs to stay, what do I need to replace, what should I focus on, and how does this already look heading into the season? Like if I were just to juxtapose this 1 for 1, here we go, 24, this would be my opening day lineup. I think it's a great visual to kind of go, oh yeah, I need some more running backs, or I need some wide receivers, or we're looking at your college roster, you're going, I got to figure out what I'm doing at the tight end position.
Yeah, tight end quarterbacks for me for sure. Also, this all came about because honestly, Fantrax shuts down, like it locks. You know what I'm saying? So you can't touch it for a month or 2 until they turn it over. Once they turn it over, look, you already have something already dialed in. You know who you're losing, who you have left, so you can go ahead and throw them on the minor spot, or you can start dropping them if they allow you to drop them because they're already in the NFL or blah, blah, blah. So then you're already able to kind of make these moves, set your lineup that you have or your projected lineup. And that's where you can start, because once it unlocks, then you can start making these trades and you start moving for supplemental picks, things like that, blah, blah, blah. And then, the waivers might not be open right away, but as soon as the supplemental draft's done, boom, now the waivers are wide open and you can start targeting that way.
I love this. The visual, I think, really helps. And if you have, let's say, Mike kind of highlighted with the tight end position, and that's this specific one. But I think when you have that visual, it's a lot easier to see something like that, like a big glaring hole, right? Or a more problematic spot you have to address a lot closer right now. That if you just didn't have this, you wait a long time. You're like, oh shit. Now I got. No, it's probably not supposed to say that, but shouldn't.
That's all good.
My tight end spot has one guy that probably doesn't have any production coming. That's like at least like week to week. I cannot rely on Terrence. Will Terrence Ferguson have a big week potentially?
Oh yeah, he always has
like 3 You can't rely on that type of production to come in. If you can think about that now, you can start addressing that. I just did a podcast for our side of South Harmon, a new one, reflecting on looking back and seeing, all right, these are where I need to go back and where I messed up and things I need to improve in my process. This is such a good visual to whether it's reflecting good in a bad way. You can go back and reflect and see, okay, where do I need to improve myself to get ready for next year? When a lot of people probably right now they're taking their naps. They're getting ready to, coast. You said, you said, I forget your wording, but they're ready to kind of hibernate or something until
they go on
April. Yeah, go on vacation. There you go.
So we'll put a bow on this. This will be our longest episode we've ever done here, but I
Sorry,
do
folks.
love it. No, it's been fantastic. I love having you on here. So just a few things here before we bounce out of here. So we talked about Fantrax and how it locks, right? And I don't think I've mentioned it on this one, but for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, which I don't blame you, I'm a rough follow.
I'm a non-follow.
Like
I'm
it.
pretty inactive.
Right, but if you go check it out at Iowa Michael, I have been on this crusade to get college fantasy football.
38 days, right? Isn't it 38 today?
38 days as of today.
Not
So
to mention the other previous years people been trying. So
yes, but I'm making it my mission. I'm not going to quit. It's almost at the point where they've just like irritated me enough that they haven't even responded. Said anything
yeah.
at all.
Fantastic.
Now it's just petty. But if you do a favor and you do enjoy college fantasy, you want to see it on Sleeper, as you should, because it just opens up everything. College dynasty, C2C leagues, easy transition, Devi leagues, the whole works.
Thinking of basketball, man, it's crazy.
Just go on there, give it a like, give it a retweet, comment away. Like, do whatever. But let's get this done. Let's band together and let Sleeper know exactly, we're not going to take it anymore. We're a twisted sister of the 80s,
We're not gonna
or 70s, whenever that was.
Yeah, I'm
You know that song.
yeah, you guys do that. I'm trying right now for our sake to just in case they end up blocking Mike, that we have, half of us is not blocked.
Need burner
So,
accounts.
yeah.
We'll be fine. I'll just make a new one with a different handle. It'll be nothing. I got it. I'm that petty. I can make unlimited Twitter accounts, and as long as you keep throwing money at Elon, he'll keep verifying them.
Oh yeah.
He don't care. Fantrax got in on it, right? They liked a few of the posts. They've also followed me. So
That's awesome.
shout out to Fantrax for the great
And
sense of
Track
humor.
Release is interactive, yes.
That was fantastic, man.
Shout out to Fantrax for that. And MFL hasn't got on it, but when has MFL ever done anything? Ever.
That's cool.
They just take their cut of your league dues every single year and never innovate anything ever.
No.
But the other one, like I said earlier at the beginning of the episode, you want to check out the visuals or actually look at the spreadsheet that Jared made, kind of get an idea. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. You can pop over there. We hope you listen to the podcast first. That's why we do it here on Campus Can. Promo code South Harmon for all the tools, 10% off your first purchase on the Campus Can website. Definitely get it. Off season is the perfect time, not only for the NFL prospects coming in, but if you're also a college nerd, you really want to dive into it. So many good tools over there, and hopefully one day we'll be able to say there's a great partnership between South Harmon and C2C where we have the college warp, which would be amazing. I need it. But Brandon, where can the people find you at? Again, the second time you've been on, first ever return guest, but you're awesome. And I'm glad we got you into a best ball league. Adam, he took over for Sean's team in the AF F.
Sean, we hope you head up.
Oh my goodness! You talk about going from I forget what you said, but I would call that a 0 to hero, right?
Zero to hero.
That was oh my goodness. Sean 12. I don't like to talk too bad about managers, but it got to the point. I'd just say that it became like one of the biggest remembrances in a bad way. Like I'm gonna remember how awful and what a just what a poor sport. Like Arthur Smith running out there and all mad. You got
man. Yeah.
Shout
out Arthur Smith.
Some of the stuff that we know behind the scenes that he may not know that we know that he was trying to do to sabotage because he lost. So this is a guy that won multiple leagues or multiple years. And now this year, Mike rebuilt it, and now he's going to go win. He was trying to sabotage just anybody beating Mike because he didn't like Mike that much, and then he's going to say he's a bad commissioner like that. It's ridiculous, man, ridiculous. I play with so many different people, so many different leagues. I'm not as many as Mike, and I'm probably going to trim some down this year, but I've played with a lot of different people, and never will I remember somebody in a bad way nearly to the level of Sean 12. So, Sean 12, if you're out there, shout out to you, buddy. He's in Wadsworth, very, very far. I probably could spit to his house. He's like literally probably 20 minutes from here. And
I was gonna say, and he's
crazy, man. Oh my god.
The man sold his soul for third place. Needless to say, I already have the spreadsheet up. I'm ready to rock and roll and some best ball. So
luckily for you, I don't think you're able to go see some of the offers he made, which were declined to other teams.
I wasn't able to see his history as far as like who he drafted and blah blah blah. Like literally, like I have no draft. Like I literally went in and Mike's been straight up. He's like, man sold his soul. Like he doesn't believe in picks. He's allergic to them. Like I went, there's no 2026, dude. Like there's nothing. Like literally, it's just like he sold his soul, and I get it. Like he has that one, but he sold it for third place, dog. And I'm like, some of these guys, he probably should have moved in season, stuff like that. And you look at Mike's team, he did what he preaches, like tier down, or if you're competing and there's a trade, no trade deadline, and you're competing for a championship, bro, if you got to go pay for Jacoby Brissett or whatever you got to get done, make it happen. You know what I'm saying? Like keep winning and keep doing it. Sounds like Sean or whoever this guy was. I don't know the guy, but it sounds like he just depended on who the names were and hoping that they were just gonna. And they got in the third place, which is great. But we're trying to win championships here, so
I mean,
make those moves.
Yeah, this is one of those. Mike didn't have to sell you that hard because I think you're ready for the challenge. But this is one of those where it's like Bob Ross, like you got to take this messed up painting and you got to figure out how to turn this portrait into something. But you don't have really much paint to work with. You're just gonna have to figure this out and go
make it happen.
Yeah, I believe you will. It's just he definitely left you with a fun. This is one of those where it's a challenge to take over. Like you're going to challenge yourself to figure out the way to make it happen. So it'll be a fun one, man. I'm glad that you're in there. We got some good people in that league now too.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Fizzles.
I was gonna say Fizzle's in there, like some people that didn't start with the league now that are in there. That's gonna be a fun one. I have a team that was a failed contender. So Mike initially rebuilt in that team. I was going for it. My team was a failed contender, and I took mine to the bottom. It's really bad, and it's gonna be a little bit of a uphill battle. So I'm excited to get there eventually, but it'll be a fun one, man.
I'm glad you could be here to witness the rise of the McNutted from worst to first.
Yep.
I want you to put the word out there. We back up.
We back up.
Back up. Brandon, thank you so much for hopping on. This has been awesome. Longest one in the history of Canton Bound, at least for us. I don't know how long.
90 minutes, man. This is sweet.
Adam, buddy, it was good to have you back. And anytime I could just not do a solo show would be great. I'm sorry to everyone who always has to struggle listening to me talk to a wall, but I do it for y'all. We got to get a show out every week.
But, hey, listen, there was, Mike's solo show. I don't be so hard on yourself, man. I listen to it. I enjoy it. But going from the Mike solo to the 3-way here, this was fun, man. I enjoy having Brandon on every time we've gotten a chance to get together, man. So we'll always link up in the future too.
All right, everybody. That'll do it for Canton Bound episode 19. We'll see you back here, same time, same place for episode 20 right here. Peace.